Radio 107.8 FM.
Hello and welcome to Sundazed, and this week we're going to be hearing from some of the kids at St Michael's Junior School in Bowthorpe, and they have some stories for us this week. I'm at St Michael's today and I have with me
Katie Norman,
Lauren Calver,
Emma Reynolds.
These girls entered a competition with quite a lot of the other people from your school, didn't you, about what would you do if you had a time machine? And I think you've all come up with quite different approaches, but Katie, you came...
I went through my wardrobe.
Where did you come in competition?
Third place.
Came third place, and that's fantastic.
I came second place.
Yep, this is Lauren. Lauren came second, and the winner was...
Emma Reynolds.
Katie, can you tell me a little bit about your story, and what was it about using a time machine that made you want to write what you did?
My story is about me going through my wardrobe and going into Wonderland. I've done two stories instead in my imagination, so I've done Narnia and Wonderland.
And you joined the two stories together, but there's something else going on in your story, isn't there? There's a very important date in your story somewhere.
Yeah, it's in 1945.
There's one bit in it I really love because she has a red and...
Smelly lake.
She does, and she keeps people's heads in it, which is absolutely revolting, but it's such a stunning image, I thought we just had to bring that in. But there's a real sense of menace around her, isn't there? And she's really sort of big trouble. What sort of time in history is it set in before they go to Narnia itself? Can you remember?
It's in a war place in Narnia at the beginning, so the children have to go to someone else's house.
Evacuees? There are evacuees in this big house, are there?
Through the wardrobe, it's like a war thing. It's like a king and they have lots of fights with swords and that.
They do, and the thing that's interesting about that is that in both these stories, Alice in Wonderland was written in the Victorian era. So, there would have been, I don't know, it might have been the Crimean War going on there, but there'd been some kind of war. But certainly in 1945, much as, the time when Narnia was set in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe in real time, as it were, that was the Second World War as well, wasn't it? And where they go, they end up in fights. That's just a big part of story, isn't it? Defeating an enemy or solving a problem or something like that. So you've got a lot of big ideas going on in there about you're linking the battleground to the Red Queen and she's got to be defeated. This isn't an imaginary character in your story. In your story, the main character is...
Me.
Katie Norman. Now, your story had this really amazing vehicle in it, didn't it, Lauren?
A time machine.
Can you tell us a little bit about how did you dream this time machine up? Because it's a very elaborate, very vivid description of the vehicle that you travel in. What gave you the idea for it? Did you have a sort of picture of it in your head before you started?
Well, I tried to find a picture of one on the internet, but I couldn't find one, so I made it up in my head, yeah.
Well, that's great. So you almost you did a kind of mental sketch, did you, to see what it looked like before? I love the fact that it's got this parasol or umbrella.
Also, I went on there. I did look at some things, and I tried to just describe it really, really well.
Right. So you got some ideas from things you saw, and then some ideas from things you thought, and then you had a good enough picture in your head to give us this really brilliant description of what you travel in. It sounds like quite a plush vehicle, quite a nice thing to sit in. But your character gets into a bit of difficulty, doesn't she? It's a bit of a close shave because she's not sure how to steer it yet. And by the time we get to the end of the story, she's just starting to think, yeah, I might do that again. But you said to me, didn't you, when we were talking a little while ago, what did you think your character was going to try and do next time around?
Should learn how to steer it and then go to really nice places.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, you can go anywhere you like. Once you know how it works and how to protect yourself, then the world and time are your oyster.
She could go to loads of different places, even if they're dangerous, but the time machine protected her last time.
Yeah, the time machine sort of just got her out of it in time, didn't it? It seemed to have a sense that she was about to breathe her last, and it got her out of that. So it would do that again, would it, you think, in another story?
She could just jump in and press the button. Now she knows to work it, and then she'd just shoot off and get her if it's a dangerous place.
That's fantastic. Well, I look forward to hearing that a little bit later on. Now we have Emma Reynolds. Hello, Emma Reynolds. Now, you were the winner of this competition, and your story had a different feel to it. Could you tell me a little bit about what your story is about?
Well, it's about these two sisters who find a time machine, and they travel to the past where they lived before, and then they travel to the future and see themselves in the future.
They do, don't they? And there's a lot of interesting ideas going on in your story. There's a really nice development in the relationship between the two sisters. And I think everybody's familiar with what that relationship might be, but you go off on this adventure and you kind of get the sense by the end of it that, not that you won't ever fight again, because that's what brothers and sisters are like, but that you've shared something really, really special. You drew a sort of fairly important conclusion about the future, didn't you, when you just decided to travel that tiny little distance in time into the future. And what did you decide by the end of it?
That they'd had enough and that they didn't want to travel anymore for that day.
What particularly about their future did they think that it was not a good idea to
stay there, because they didn't want to know too much about their future?
And I think that's good, isn't it? You could worry. People worry about the future anyway, but I think you would worry a whole lot more if you felt like it was all mapped out for you. You know, if you knew exactly what was going to happen to you, life would be boring. Perhaps it wouldn't. Some people might disagree and think it would be very exciting. Thank you very much for talking to me, and thank you for letting us have a look at your stories. It's been really interesting, and we look forward to hearing them.
Thanks very much.
Sundazed on Future Radio 107.8 FM.
Katie in Wonderland by Katie Norman. On the 15th of November 2012, I suddenly woke up and I saw something between the gap of my wardrobe doors. There was a flashing light. I got out of bed and went towards my stripy white wardrobe, and I peeked my head in. Then whoa, the bottom of my wardrobe where I kept my shoes were floating at the top because there was a heavy wind blowing in through the floor. Tree roots like big stick hands were coming up towards me and grabbed me by my shirt and dragged me down through the wardrobe. I suddenly found myself in a smelly, muddy, dull and dusty tunnel. I found myself upside down and I fell on my head. I rolled over and saw a huge rabbit running and looking at an old gold compass. "Oh, I'm late for the tea party," he said as he turned to look at me. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am Katie Norman," I said. "How long have you been here for?" "About 5 minutes," I said. "Well, all new people must visit the Mad Hatter," he said in a happy voice. He liked visitors. We skipped together and sang a nutty song, even though I've never heard the words before. We were off to the Mad Hatter's. When we got out of the tunnel, we came out into a dark forest, and then we got to the tea party. There was a long table in a rocky garden, and there were clean and comfy chairs. There was a huge teapot and lots of dirty and clean cups all around the table. His house was a broken and twisted old windmill. "Hello, Rabbit, and who are you, my love?" he asked me. "I am Katie Norman," I said. "So, Katie, where do you come from?" said the Mad Hatter. "I come from Norwich," I said to everyone. "Norwich? Never heard of that place before," said everyone at the table. Suddenly, someone nearby shouted, "Hide now!" "Why are we hiding?" I said. "We are hiding because the Red Queen soldiers are coming and she wants them to cut off our heads. So run for your lives and hide." So I ran with the Mad Hatter and hid in his windmill. "Hello, is anyone here?" says the Queen of Hearts servant, but nobody answered. When the soldiers left, everyone came out of their hiding place. Then the Hatter gave me a drink which said, "This makes people small." I read the bottle as I was gulping. Suddenly I was smaller than a cupcake on the table, and the Mad Hatter took his hat off and I got on it. The animals around the table said, "Can we come with you?" "No," said the Mad Hatter, and the Hatter and I set off. We talked about the Queen of Hearts, and the Mad Hatter told me a story about a sad day. One day in 1942, the White Queen had a party, and the Red Queen came. She set fire to trees, houses and people, and now the Red Queen cuts off people's heads to go in her red and smelly lake. The Red Queen stole the White Queen's crown. The White Queen is her good sister. So then the Mad Hatter took me somewhere. He told me he was taking me to the Red Queen's castle. Why are you taking me to the castle? I said. Because they are looking for you, Katie, he said. When we got to the castle, it smelt gross and disgusting because of the lake behind the gates. I drank a drink and was big again. We walked through, and the hard stone castle had flags with heads and red hearts on them. I went in, and the Red Queen said, Katie, you are here. Let's get you a red dress on. The Hatter told me about a sword and told me where it was. Katie, we need you to get the White Queen's crown back, he said. The sword has powers in it, and it is the only way to kill the fat dragon. Then I went outside and went into a little shed, and underneath a red blanket there was a sword. Then I went to the White Queen's castle and said, I've come to help you get your crown back. Yes, thank you, said the White Queen. The next day, the Red Queen knew that I had gone, so then, that day, it was time to fight the dragon. I was the chosen one, and so on the 17th of November, it was time. I went back to the forest and was looking for a huge egg. He was inside the egg and was listening and smelling for the person who was coming to fight him and get the crown back. The crown was inside the black egg. I spotted the black egg as I got nearer to the egg. The egg cracked open and the dragon crawled towards me. I was nervous. I ran up the cracked eggshell pieces so I was high enough to cut off his spiky, fat black head. I jumped up and shouted, "Off with your head!" and I sliced off his spiky head. It rolled away. "Freedom is ours!" I shouted. I took the crown and gave it back to the White Queen. I was a champion of Wonderland, and then my wardrobe was there and it was time to go home. I gave everyone a hug and went into my wardrobe, and then I was in bed and I went to sleep and everything was back to normal.
Sundazed on Future Radio 107.8 FM.
Will you walk a little faster? Said a whiting to a snail. There's a porpoise close behind us, treading on my tail. See how eagerly the lobsters and the turtles all advance. They are waiting on the shingle. Will you come and join the dance? Oh, will you, won't you, will you, won't you join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you, won't you join the dance? You can really have no notion how delightful it will be when they take us up and throw us with the lobsters out to sea. But the snail replied too far, and gave a look askance. Said he thanked the whiting kindly, but he would not join the dance. Oh, would not, could not, would not, could not, would not join the dance. Would not, could not, would not, could not, could not join the dance. What matters it how far we go? His scaly friend replied, there is another shore, you know, upon the other side. The further off from England, the nearer is to France. Then turn not pale, beloved snail, but come and join the dance. join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you, won't you join the dance?
Sapphire and the Time Machine by Lauren Calver. As I was walking, the humongous, thick, bony trees surrounded me. Drips of dew trickled on me from the fresh green leaves. I could hear the loving hummingbirds singing away at the top of their voices, the most wonderful noise to reach my ears. Brown, grubby mud underneath my feet, making me slip and slide. Beautiful bluebells came into vision. I gasped with delight, seeing such an awesome sight, like blue water meandering down a rippling stream. What a wonderful display. "What is that doing here?" I muttered. There was a brown wooden shed standing in front of me, with a rich golden horseshoe-shaped lock. Slowly, I reached my hand out to touch it, when suddenly, one at a time, a sequence of green lights appeared. Quickly, I grabbed the round knob handle next to it and turned it quickly, although I felt massively frightened. I was very curious. My heart was pounding as I pulled the door open. In front of me was a big blue fluffy blanket covering something. I carefully unwrapped the mystery of what was underneath. I stepped back in shock at the sight of what appeared to be a strange mechanical vehicle. A soft golden chair sitting in the wooden deep boat, lined with a rich red smooth carpet. At the front of this mysterious vehicle were 2 gear sticks made of metal and were about 1 meter long. Perched at the back, hanging off a long stick, was a pretty patterned umbrella, which shaded the spectacular chair. Out of control, I sat in the chair and pulled hard on one of the gear sticks. Under the vehicle, I saw twinkling flashes. Shaking with fear, I held onto the front bar with all my strength as the crazy machine started to lift. In seconds, I was no longer sitting in the old rusty shed. "Where am I?" I cried. I could hear screaming and guns shooting loudly. The smell of burning reached my nose. All the fire made my eyes screw up. I hated this. "Oh no," I screamed. A bullet was heading towards me. I closed my eyes and wished to go back to the grubby shed. This was the end. The bullet was 1 inch away. There was no way I was going to survive. I just wished I wasn't crazy enough to jump in this time machine. I don't know why I did it, and now this is the day I had to die. Suddenly, the time machine sprang up into the sky. It went through a tunnel of emotions. It was really nice. I don't know why I shut my eyes on the way. Why did I miss this on the way? It's wonderful. After a few seconds, I was back in the wooden shed, and I was safe and sound. I placed a new golden lock onto the door. Also, I decided I was going to have another adventure soon. The end.
Sweet dreams are made of this. Who am I to disagree? Travel the world and the 7 seas. Everybody's looking
Radio 107.8 FM.
The Time Machine by Emma Reynolds. I woke up suddenly to the deafening noise of a cracking bottle. I sprang out of bed, then rapidly switched on the lights to find something that looked like a time machine on a bottle on the floor. I stepped forward and took a closer look. So exciting, I thought out loud, because it was a time machine. I went and took a look inside. Not long after, my annoying big sister came in. "What's that?" she asked in surprise. "It's a time machine," I had to tell her. She wouldn't shut up. She is so annoying, and she would have told. She didn't, because she was always talking about time machines. "Leave me alone so I can concentrate on how to work this time machine out," I said, feeling very anxious. Suddenly, we heard a strange noise. It was coming from the time machine. We looked around cautiously and saw the time machine lighting up. Looking at each other inquisitively, we grinned and ran into the time machine. Luckily, we just made it before the time machine started to travel to another time. It was a bumpy ride to wherever we were going to. I looked around and saw a sign saying, "We are going to the year 1995. I wondered what the sign meant because it was so confusing. I didn't know what it was all about. Suddenly, we landed. It was surprisingly gentle. We peered out of a small window. We arrived at a park near where we used to live. The door opened. We walked through feeling quite nervous, wondering what to expect. Strangely, we found ourselves in our old house, which was all horrible, because we had moved out and the new people had moved in. We went and looked around, then realised that the people living there were really mean. The weird thing was that they had all our furniture and personal things and treated it with no respect at all. We felt so awful, we just wanted to go home, and off we went back into the time machine and got inside. After we went back to the time machine, we decided to see if it would take us anywhere else before we went home. The only trouble was we weren't sure how. After some time, after a lot of thinking, the time machine started up again and took off. Eventually we landed again, but this time we were in the year 2020. We were so excited. "That's funny," I said. "I was then thinking what it would be like in the future." "Me too," exclaimed my big sister. "That must be how the time machine works. We go wherever we are thinking of." The door opened. We peered round and saw that we were at some kind of party. We were at our friend's wedding reception. We saw ourselves. We were sitting with our husbands and our children. We looked really happy. After some time watching our older selves enjoy the night and dancing, we decided to go, as we didn't want to know too much about our future. Back in the time machine, we felt very happy, but decided we had enough time travelling for one day and thought of going home. Arriving home safely at the exact day and time we left, we sat for a while talking about travels. Suddenly, the time machine shrank and turned into a small ornament with a note lying beside it. The note read, "Think big and I will grow bigger so you can use me again." We looked at each other smiling, feeling happy, knowing we could time travel again. Our adventure might be over for one day, but we looked forward to our next adventure.
Okay, well thank you very much girls, because you did a really fantastic job of reading those stories out. Have you enjoyed it, do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all three girls, you've enjoyed writing these stories, spending time thinking them up, and you're quite nervous, weren't you, about reading them out? Yeah? No, you weren't. Lauren wasn't. No, she was all guns blazing. So you didn't feel nervous?
No.
She didn't feel nervous. So you've done a really, really fantastic job, and I'm very impressed. So are you going to say goodbye to your many, many listeners?
Bye. Bye.
Well, thank you very much indeed, girls. Thank you.
Sundazed on Future Radio 107.8 FM.